Okay. Kum Len and Avlat Gemara. We are up to the Mishnah of Samach Dalad Amar Aleph, who were just talking about Puravu, and we'll continue along the same theme. Says the Mishnah, Nasa Isha, you married a woman, V'shah Ima Esa Shanim, you lived with her for 10 years, La Yolda, you didn't have any children. You cannot say, well, I don't have the mitzvah Puravu anymore. You need to do something about it. So you divorce her, you marry someone else. What about her? Can she marry somebody else? Because she was married for 10 years. So we say, she can marry somebody else, because we don't know whose fault it is that there were no children. Was it his, or was it hers? Or just they didn't have a mazel together, and then each one has to try independently. And she now could stay married again for another 10 years with someone else to see and try to have children. If she had a child but she miscarried, she counts from the moment the 10 years start counting, not from when she got married to the person, from the moment she aborted, she miscarried, because it would have been a child. So therefore, you have to start another 10 years from then. Now, if there's a big machlekes, what happens if you actually, we'll learn a little bit further tomorrow, we'll talk about it. One thing I forgot to tell you 2 days ago, when we learned the Gemara, if a goy becomes a ger, whether he fulfilled the mitzvah Puravu, and Rabbi Yochanan says if he had children while he was a goy, he did fulfill the mitzvah Puravu, and everybody wonders why, because the Rambam's actually of the view, I forgot to tell you, that the only time Rabbi Yochanan says that you fulfill the mitzvah Puravu is if the children also converted with you. Even though they're not your children legally, but because biologically they are your children, so you brought people into the world, and you brought Yidden into the world, and that's sufficient for the mitzvah of Puravu, even though legally they're not your children. However, Taisus and others learn that even if the children remain goyim, as a goy, you also have a mitzvah of populating the world, and therefore you have brought people into the world. Okay, we'll come back to this. What about Nasi Sheva? You lived with somebody for 10 years. There were no children. You should leave her, but you have to give her a ksuva. We don't know whose fault it is, so therefore she's entitled to a ksuva, but you have to leave her. Big machlek is showing him if yotzi means we force him physically, as the expression is, we shake him with sticks, we beat him up to make sure that he divorces her, give both a chance to have children, or yotzi means we cajole him to divorce her. Maybe the problem is that there's no schus between the two of them to have children. We have no proof of this. We do have some kind of a basis for it. It says by Avram, it says Mikate Esa Shani in the end of 10 years, Avram, the end of 10 years, Canaan, while Avram was living in the land of Canaan, that's when he brought Hagar into the picture. Why 10 years? Lamda, and also it says when they moved to Eretz Canaan. What about all the years they were married prior to that? If you went to Eretz Yisrael, then the 10 years only count for Eretz Yisrael, and the years prior to that don't count. And Rashi says an interesting thing here. The reason why it doesn't count here, he says here, Dilma, I'm going to quote you Rashi. Dilma mishum avain chutzla oretz hemakurim. The sin of living outside of Israel is what caused them to be childless. There's a big machlekes Rishonim, so this din of 10 years doesn't apply at all in Chutz La'aretz. Here the Gemara talks about Chutz La'aretz, then you went to Israel. What if you don't go to Israel? You live in Chutz La'aretz 10 years and didn't have any children. Does this din still apply? So by Rashi's words, the avon, the sin of living in Chutz La'aretz is like a punishment, therefore you can't have children, then it would seem that living in Chutz La'aretz, you don't divorce after 10 years, according to Rashi, because what's the point? You're both still living in Chutz La'aretz. Others don't learn that way. Others just learn if you were in Chutz La'aretz and then you went to Yisrael, you have a new lease on life. And in fact, many tzaddikim used to advise those who didn't have any children in Chutz La'aretz to go to Yisrael, and then they have a much better chance of having children. But to say that if you live in Chutz La'aretz for 10 years and have children, there's no union of divorcing, don't say. By the way, that Amor writes that Anu, all of these things, Anu ein noigin ked. Amor and Siman Aleph. Right, so we don't have this minute of divorcing based on these things. Anyway, we're going to continue. That if either he or she got sick, so if we do know why they didn't have children, it's not because naturally they couldn't have children. There's a cause. One of them was, temporarily ill, or she was, or he was, or they were incarcerated in prison, so they couldn't mate. Those years don't count because we know exactly why, and now that they've been eliminated, the reasons, no problem. Rabbi Nachman says, why don't we learn from Yitzchak? See, you're telling me it's 10 years, let's learn from Yitzchak for 20 years. See, it says Yitzchak was 40 years old when he married Rivka. It says, how old was Yitzchak when they gave birth to Yitzchak and Esav and Yaakov? Yitzchak ben Shishim Shana, but he was 20 years, 60 years old. 20 years have transpired. So let's learn from here that you can stay married for 20 years before you have children. Amalei says there's different. Yitzchak akur haya. Yitzchak had no natural means to have any children, and therefore that's different. We're talking about a case here that there's no reason why they should have had children. In 10 years elapsed, they didn't have children. Maybe we'll see why it didn't work out. They have to move on. Each one has to try separately. Here by Yitzchak, we knew exactly why. He was an akur, and because he was an akur, he was sterile. He couldn't have any children. So there's no, what's the point of the divorce? He couldn't have it. If he married somebody else, it wouldn't be any different. He couldn't have any children. Now the Cheshbon Tesha says that we learned yesterday, we discussed about Rivka, that Rivka was 3 years old when she married Yitzchak. If that's the case, then at the Tana, you don't really have children. You got to wait 10 years till she's an adult. So what's the most question? There's only 10 years that they could have had children. And so still, it doesn't matter, it took 20 years, but 20 years from 3 years old when she got married. So as we learned yesterday, there's another medrash that says that she was 14 or 12 at the time. So therefore, this Gemara follows that particular medrash. Or Taisa says that in the Gemara Sanhedrin, we learned in the 7th parak, that Bathsheba, who gave birth to Shlomo, was 6 years old and was already a second child. That in those days, the woman's physiological constitution was much stronger than today. They were able to bear children much younger. Anyway, says the Gemara, if you tell me that Yitzchak is an akar, so you can't bring any raya, you knew Avram Nami akar haba. Avram also was sterile. In fact, all the others were sterile. Avram and Yitzchak both sterile, so therefore, who said you have to wait 10 years? Maybe generally you don't wait, you have to wait 2 years, 3 years. Avram was sterile. There's no point in doing anything else. We need that for Rabbi Barabba. Yitzchak was sterile, therefore Yitzchak, there was no reason for Yitzchak to marry anybody else, wouldn't have made any difference whatsoever. So why do we need to know that Yitzchak was 60 years old? Not to tell you how many years to live together before you bring someone else in or you marry somebody else. The reason why we need to tell you 60 years old for another reason altogether. But by Sheikh and Avram, it says 10 years, that's to teach us that 10 years is the maximum that you're allowed to wait without having any children. Why by Yitzchak do we need to know his age when he gave birth? So he says, why does it, we had this already before, why are the years of Yishmael counted? We had this in Megillah Barichas, Yaakov know exactly how old Yaakov was. That'd be 64, 64 when he left home, 77 when he went to Lavan. It was 14 years he was by Shem Bever. 63, 63 when he left home, and 77 when he came to Lavan. Those 14 years of Shem Bever don't count, and he wasn't punished for them. That's how we reckon his years. Nothing to do with teaching us about when you have to think about having children. Yitzchak Avinu himself was sterile. Shlomo said Yitzchak Hashem. Yitzchak davened to Hashem. L'noichach ishtoi opposite his wife. Al ishtoi nem. It doesn't say about his wife. They were both sterile. They're both sterile. And why Taka did Abish to make that the others should be sterile? Abraham, Sarah, Yitzchak, and Rivka. We'll see in a minute. So, why does Hashem respond to Yitzchak? They're both sterile, and both daven, and Hashem should have responded to both of them. The answer, you're right. They both davened, but Hashem's response was to Yitzchak. And why is that? You cannot compare Tfilas Tzaddik ben Tzaddik with Tfilas Tzaddik ben Rasha. On the one hand, you would think that a Tzaddik ben Rasha about Tshuva is greater than a Tzaddik. Wouldn't his Tfilas be, or her Tfilas be better than the Tzaddik? On the other hand, no. When a Tzaddik ben Tzaddik davens, there are two people davening. He's davening, and the schus of the others, together they're davening. Tzaddik ben Rasha, no matter how great a tzaddik is, he's a lone voice because his father or mother are not joining him at all. They're Rishayim. Therefore, tzaddik ben tzaddik is better. The same thing Shlomo brings down when you get a chazan in the Amud. It's always better to have some with yichus. Even on the other hand, there's a mile in having a tzaddik ben Rasha because they're much higher level, and the debate goes on. Why did they wish to make it this way? that they were sterile. Because Hashem desires and enjoys the davening of the tzaddikim. He enjoys the davening of the tzaddikim. And it says in Sfarim, the reason why Hashem did it this way is to completely cut off any connection between Avram and Terach. Because if Avram just could, continue to procreate normally, then some of the genes of Terach would be there as well. But because there's a Maisa Nissim, it couldn't have happened naturally. And the Maisa Nissim, it was filtered through. Everything that happened naturally stopped. And Yitzchak was born now from a nest, and therefore there's no connection to Terach. Even though in Haggadah we say, and we count Terach in as a Avasenu, that's just a biological fact, but not then. But in actuality, it stopped by Abraham. Why do we use the word et, which is also like a rake? Why do we compare the davening of Tzaddik to a rake? Just like a rake transfers the grains from one place to another. And saying that the tefillah of tzaddikim is so too, when a tzaddik davens, it transforms the Eibishter from one who is angry to one who is compassionate. Rab Ami says that going further than that, not only were they sterile, but Avram besada tumtum hayu. They were tumtum. Tumtum is that there was a skin growth over the genital area, and you couldn't even tell whether they were a male or a female. It happened so many times. Tumtum. It says habitu tzur chatzvasam. Look at the rock that they were carved out from. V'makevas burn across them, and look at the inside of the bar of the pit where they were etched out from. Uksiv, and it says habitu Avram avichem. Stare at Avram avichem. Sarah to Chalalchem, and to Sarah who gave birth to you. That's the following pasuk. So what are we saying? We're saying here is that the stone that made you, which is carved out something on the stone. That means I gave Avraham Avinu the ability to procreate, and I created a uterus, a womb for Sarah. Actually, she herself was barren. Like the ram we had before, she never said, but he saw the akora ein lavlad. It says two things. She was akora, she was barren, and then said ein lavlad. Ein lavlad means she didn't even have a womb. I feel the base vlad ein la. She didn't have a womb. Obviously, she's an eyeless. And miraculously, suddenly she got it. So we're talking about 10 years. This is how long they should be separated without children. We're talking about the early years. Early years, people lived for a long life because the early lives, even Moshe Rabbeinu's time, 120 years. So therefore, it's a certain percentage of those years. So you wait 10 years, and then even so, post that, you still have the ability to procreate. And 10 years is the longest time we give. But now the generation is much smaller, much less, like 70 years. Then we have to reduce that window. The window of production is reduced. Therefore, the maximum time we give is 2.5 years, which is basically three terms of 9 months, full gestation. That's 27 months, and then each one needs a month. Go to mikveh and then to fall pregnant. So therefore, it's 3 and 24 is 20 is 27, and 3 is 30 months, which is 2.5 years. And Rabbi Nachman, he says, Shalosh Shanim, 3 years, Keneged Shalosh Kiddush. Every Rosh Hashanah, Hashem remembers all those who couldn't conceive. So we go through 3 Rosh Hashanahs, but not 10 years. That's when Sarah, Rachel, Chana will conceive. Amar Rabba, less than 100 qualities. This is totally wrong. The 10 years is an absolute number, not a relative number. Mechdi, Masnisa, Matokin, who organized Al Meshach? Rebbe. Well, we made David already the times of David HaMelech, it was reduced from 120 down to 70. The Chsiv, it says, Yemei Shanaseinu Behem Shivim Shana. V'im Begvura Shmoyne Shana. 80 years already is a big deal. Now, interesting. It starts off that paragraph, which is a big difficulty that everyone has. Starts off Tfilah L'Moshe Ish Elokim. We say this on Shabbos. Tfilah L'Moshe Ish Elokim, and then in the middle will say Yemei Shanaseinu Behem Shivim Shana. How can Moshe Rabbeinu say Yemei Shanaseinu Behem Shivim Shana when he lived 120? In fact, 120 he was punished. He should have lived longer. It's only because of the main Meriva that he was punished, and yet he says Yemei Shanaseinu Behem Shivim Shana. So Tosfos here very importantly says on the top of the page that even though this pasuk starts over with Tfilah L'Moshe, in all probability, David HaMelech is the one who said some of the sentences there, including Yemei Shanaseinu Behem Shivim Shana, because he says it's impossible that Moshe Rabbeinu would have said that. So, 70 years, and yet the Rebbe said 10 years is what we allow. And this person was to to have children from her. Says the Gemara, how do you know that it's his fault? And therefore he has to give her a ksuba and everything else. But Dilma, maybe it's her fault. Maybe she's the one who cannot bear children, and therefore she should forfeit her ksuba because she didn't. You came to the marriage thinking that you're going to have children, and because of her you didn't. So she should forfeit the marriage. Why did ksuba? Why is it that you have to give her ksuba? So my answer is an interesting thing. When it comes to her, even the a woman doesn't have the mitzvah puravu, and a man does. Now, what does that actually mean? Rabbi Yechon holds that a woman does have a mitzvah, but we say generally that only a man has a mitzvah, a woman doesn't have the mitzvah. So how is that possible when we talk about the woman always is that keres habayis, and so on and so forth, and yet we say that a woman does not have the mitzvah puravu. We say that a woman does not have the mitzvah of chinuch. The whole in a woman is that keres habayis to raise the children, and then there's no mitzvah of chinuch. How do we explain that? So they're both explained. The idea of a mitzvah is to connect. Connecting means you're not there yet. You need to do something to connect. So a man naturally does not have the patience, the time to go and raise his children, and therefore, by the man we had to make it a mitzvah that he should take an interest in getting married, and that he should take an interest in the chinuch of his children. For a woman, there's no point in making a mitzvah because they're there already. That's what they are. Naturally, they want to bring up a family. Naturally, they want to have children. Naturally, they want to size the children, raise the children properly, and give them the best possible education. So you don't have to make a mitzvah out of it because that's their life, which means it's much more naturally for them. And for a man, it's more unnatural. They don't have the patience and so on. Says the Gemara further. And therefore, but because she doesn't have the mitzvah puravu, then remember the struggles that we have in life, a lot of times they come as challenges to mitzvahs that we're trying to do. But for her, there's no challenge. She doesn't have the mitzvah. And therefore, if there's a challenge, the chances are that it's not her fault. Even though it could be yes, but the chances are that it isn't. If it doesn't get punished, it's probably his fault, and therefore she's entitled to ksuba. It's not so they told Rabba, we had the same thing yesterday. They told Rav Sheshes, go get married and have children. And to brush them off, he said, if I was zoiche, if I was meant to have children, I would have had with this wife here. If I didn't have any children, it's my fault. What's the point of marrying somebody else? From the first wife I had. So we see clearly from here, there's no point in marrying a second time. Why do we say that he should divorce and marry a second time? Why divorce at all? What's the difference? Let him stay here with her already. He's not going to have children anyway. Says the Gemara, he was just brushing them off. He knew he won't have any children. And why is that? We had this yesterday as well. Look, a sad story. How come nobody ever brought it up to Rav Huna? Rabba Bazavda, he also became sterile because of on account of the yeshiva of Rav Huna. He used to give these lengthy drushes, and he was a giant in learning that no one had the temerity to step out in the middle of a shir. Rav Gidl, Morna mentioned a number of other people had the same issue. Rav Gidl became sterile because of the shir Rav Huna. Rav Chelba another one, Rav Chelba. These are all great Amoraim. And we had yesterday Rav Sheshes Sheshes became sterile. Rav Acha Yaakov, however, did something else. And in fact, there were 60. I will also say there were 60 students. All of them became sterile, except Rabbi Yaakov. Rabbi Yaakov, he also felt that he had some kind of sickness setting on him. He also had to go to the bathroom terribly. He felt the sickness was coming on him. What did he do? He treated it straight away. He got his friends to hang him up on a tree upside down. The Beirav and the Yeshiva of Rav, the Nofak Minei Kuhutza Yiraka. And out from his body came out something green, and like a little, like a spoon or something, a date spoon came out of him, which is basically the accumulation of all the urine that was piling up. And he got really cleansed himself out. We were 60 elders, 60 great men, as we mentioned some of the names here. The Kulu all of them became sterile because of Yeshiva Huna. Levar ma'ana, except me. The Kaima ben Avshai, because I took care of myself, because I fulfilled the pasuk that says, if somebody's wise and takes precautions, they will become smart. I took precautions after every shear. I would hang myself on the tree and make sure that whatever I have left inside my body would come out. So I always wondered why no one ever told Rav Huna, you're endangering the lives of your students. You're endangering the lives of your students by giving such a long shiur. Give them a break. Give them recess. And every chinuch, you have a recess. You have a break. Anyway, says the Gemara, Girsha Muteres. Now, the din is that you divorce her, and after 10 years you divorce and both of you can get remarried again. What happens if there was a child? Okay, where there's a big machlekes to show you, a lot of machlekes in here to show you. What happens? You had one child, but you didn't fulfill the mitzvah puravu. Do you still divorce after 10 years? Because you didn't fulfill the mitzvah puravu, that's one machlekes. Then within that, those who hold that you do have to divorce the mitzvah puravu. What happened? You had two children. You actually fulfilled the mitzvah puravu. But remember, we learned that there's another mitzvah midrabanan called le'edev al tanach yotcha, that you have to continue trying to have children. Let's say she can't after two. Do you then have an union of divorcing her in order to get married to somebody else? Or we say no, that if you have one child, there's no longer a mitzvah puravu. Of course, you brought somebody into this world. What happens if you had a child and then this child died? When do you start counting the 10 years? From when the child died or from when the child was born? And you say, 10 years went by, you have to now separate or not. So these are the machlekes that we have. Then there's a very big machlekes is regarding Cholim and Rabbeinu Gershom. We'll come back to that soon. Says about it further, Girsha, divorced the Mutedes is permitted. So it says she's permitted her again, Shani, in Shlishi Loy. It seems to me you can only marry a second time, not a third time. In other words, twice. If you marry twice and 10 years elapsed each time with no children, then you've proven a chazaka that you can't have any children. And you remember we had a whole argument in the past whether chazaka is 2 times or 3 times. And it seems that our Mishnah follows it as 2 times. We had this before in this very Masechta. Mani, who is this Rebbe? This follows Rebbe. The time we learned, Mol Harishon, let's say you circumcised a child, and the child died. Sheni, then you malad a second child, and the child died. Shlishi leitamel, you should not malad a third time because you're endangering the child's life. Obviously, this is like a hemophiliac, the Gemara will say, and therefore it's dangerous to have an operation. And you don't. This is what Rashi always says: is an oral that says because his brothers died, he had no choice. So twice is a chazaka. Shlishi tamel, the third child you can also circumcise. Reveal tamel, sorry, the fourth child that you should not circumcise. But Tanya, else we learn Ibcha that Rebbe's one that says 3 times a chazaka, and Shimon says 2 times. Which one is right? Which is the later one? Because that's the one that counts. That's the final law. Toshma coming in. There's once a story, but there were 4 sisters, right? So Rivka, Rachel, B'tzipari, and the Siddur Sipari. Shemola Rishona, the first sister, malad her child, the mace died. Shnia, second sister, then malad her child, the mason died. Shlishi, the third sister, malad her child, the mason died. And the Levi is the fourth sister, boss of Shingam, came to Shingam, so what should I do? And Amalah, al Tumaili. There's obviously a genetic issue over here. I don't want you to circumcise anymore. So what is it from here? Rav Shimon ben Gamliel holds that only the 4th time. That means 3 times establish a chazaka. So that holds 2. That's the first version that we had. And since Rabbi Yechon is telling us the story, and this must be the end of the life of Shimon Gamliel. Rabbi Yechon was young by Rebbe, so he must have just seen Shimon Gamliel a very short time. And he's telling the story, and probably is the last opinion of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Says this proves nothing. He's telling you a story. What happened? How do we know that if the third sister would have come to Shimon and said, "Should I circumcise?" He also might have said, "Don't." It just so happened to be the 4th sister is the one who approached him. The Dilma asked Shlishi, would have said to him, "No." So my answer is, if there's no point in the story, we don't stop tell stories. If the Gemara tells us a story, there's a point, there's a message, there's a halacha we're meant to derive from it. So what's the point of the story? It just happened to be, and halachically it could even be that the third woman would have said not to. So what's the point of the story telling us that the 4th woman he said no? Everyone agrees the 4th woman you say no. The Dilma Kamasha, no, teaching something totally different. Because in this story, it's actually very interesting. Had a certain event happened to one person 3 times or 2 times, okay, it's a chazaka. Here, it's 4 different sisters. Maybe you can argue each sister. It just so happenstance. There's a mere coincidence. The Gemara now talks about genetics, which is very interesting. The idea that things pass on in the family, and that's why if 1 sister, 2 sisters, 3 sisters have a problem with hemophilia, then the 4th sister we'll assume has it as well. This is way ahead of modern medicine. Omar Rabba says Rabba. And go further. Now that we say that's sisters, not only individuals but sisters, also knows genetic. If we can say that establishes a fact. Well, you saw the Misha. When you marry a woman, you have to look also at the health of the family, not just her. If there's a family with epileptics, you should not marry into that family. Nor in a family you have leprosy, you should not marry into that family because it's genetic, and your children might have the same thing, or she might have it. Who is chazik zimna, provided that 3 members of the family, or 3 times that it happened, then it becomes established. If it's only 1, we say it's an aberration. According to Rebbe, maybe 2 is already chazaka. According to Rule, it has to be 3 times. Big machlek is in Achronim when we say in the original story they were all sisters. So how far do we go when we say look into the family and see if there's 2 cases of something or 3 cases? The Gemara says here you shouldn't get involved in the family because it's genetic. If it's a 1, we say that it's an aberration. How far do we go? Because the story is 4 sisters, it's immediate family. Or do we go look at cousins, second cousins, third cousins? How far do we go? How in the family? That's a big machlekes in Poskim as well. That's why he always says you have to ask a Rav. My have Allah. So what bottom line? What is the halacha? 2 times, 3 times. There's a story about Rabbi Yechon in the shul in the city called Moin. B'yom Kippurim shechol b'Shabbos. It was on Yom Kippur on Shabbos. You have a double reason why you shouldn't do any malachas that day. And umalar shoina, they mala the first child of mace. They mala the first child and it died. Shni and the second child of mace and died. Shlishi is the third child. Bolafano came before them. And what should we do on Shabbos, on Yom Kippur? Amala, he said, "L'chimayli." In other words, I'm passing like Rav Shimon Gamliel. I'm going to be mekel that in order to establish a chazak, it has to happen 3 times. It only happened twice, so therefore go ahead. And so Amala by Labaya Chazi. First Labaya was wondering, wow, the kasharik isura visakanta. He did 2 things there. First of all, the Shabbos and Yom Kippur, and if it's not due to do a bris milah, you're mechal Shabbos and mechal Yom Kippur, and he said, go ahead and do it. I said, well, it's a sakana. Maybe Rebbe's right. Maybe 2 times is enough to establish an issue, and yet you went ahead and malad. So even Abaye made that statement. Abaye relied it in his own personal life. What happened was as follows. But also he went, Nosba, he married a woman called Chayma, who was bar to the daughter of Isai Bereid Rav Yitzchak, Bereid Rav Yehuda. He married the daughter of Isai, who was the son of Yitzchak, son of Yehuda. The Nosbot, Rechava, the Pumpadisha. Originally, she was married to another guy called Rechava, who died. V'shachar Rav Yitzchak Bereid Rav Chana, then V'shach, who died. Then another man was married to her. Rabbi Yitzchak, the son of Rabbi Rachana, also was married to her. V'shachav died. So 2 people married to her died. That's known as a katlanis, according to Rebbe, twice. Now remember, the Nazbahu, and yet he married her. First, he was mocking there by a bris milah when it comes to sakana. Why you're lenient that 3 times establishes. And here, after 2 times, he says, well, I hold 3 times, and if there's no problem. And you know what happened? V'shachav died very young. We learned that Abai died at the age of 60. Rabba died at the age of 40. Abai died at the age of 60. But actually, the Gemara makes a sound from here that he died because she was a katlanis. I mean, she already has like the Black Widow syndrome. And we'll soon see why that is. But we actually learned elsewhere that he was a descendant of the house of Eli, which was cursed. And Rabba, who was a Kohen, died at the age of 40. Abaye, because he did Torah and Gemilut Chasadim, extended his life to 60. In fact, his life wasn't shortened. His life was extended. Anyway, comes along Rabba and says, wow, this is interesting that after he makes his comment, he himself relied on it and he put himself in danger. Says the Gemara, and what's bothering me is the following. Who's the one who told him that the halach is 3 times, right? It was Rabbi Yechon, but it wasn't Rabbi Yechon. It was someone in the name of Rabbi Yechon, and that was Rabbi Yitzchak, the son of Rabbi Yosef, said in the name of Rabbi Yechon. And so, why couldn't Abaye trust him? Because Abaye once made a comment that if a Rabbi Ovin came along and said something in the name of Yechid and the Samcha, you can rely on him because he's true to his word. But if Yitzchak, the son of Rabbi Yosef, comes along and tells us something, Yitzchak, the red one, comes along and says one, La ba Samcha, I don't trust the word he says. So he doesn't trust Yitzchak. I think, and he said that Rabbi Yechid is mekel. You can do 3 times. It's not a chazaka until 3 times. And he relied on him to get married. In other words, he must have loved that woman so much, he decided to rely on him. That's question number 1. And the reason is, Oven Yeshne B'Chazar, Oven continuously repeats to himself what happened, and Yitzchak Sumka Ein Chazar does not chazar all the time to make sure he gets it accurate. Or another pshat in Rashi is that Oven is always there by Rabbi Yechon, so he knows Rabbi Yechon ever changes his mind, Chazara, and Yitzchak Sumka is not always there. Void. Furthermore, aim of the pligi lenient mila. Also, I can say the only argument comes to bris mila, but assuming pligi. But who said the argument when it comes to weddings? Who said maybe everyone agrees when it comes to nasuyin that 2 times is enough to establish a chazak? So he must say, no. That part, the answer of the answer of not right, because the Tanya, there's actually a clear brisa with the same argument that you have by bris milah, you have by marriage. Nisas l'rishon l'meis, married to somebody and died, l'sheni b'meis and died, l'shlish to marry third person. Divrei Rebbe Shmuel says l'shlishi to nasi, third person should marry, abul l'revi like to nasi. But the fourth person don't marry. Bishlem begabe mila. So we see the same argument. Bishlem begabe mila. I understand what's going on by mila. Ika mishpacha, there is a mishpacha, the rafi dami. They have families that are hemophiliacs, and the blood, doesn't congeal and doesn't heal. So therefore, we say, look, it's a family thing. We don't want you to go ahead and the ika and what do you call the ika mishpacha, the kamidami, the other families that the blood normally heals, congeals. So I understand it makes sense. 3 times proven, or 2 times. El Nisuyin, my time, but when it comes to marriage, so what? Maybe it's a bad luck that 2 people died. Why in the world should you just prevent her from getting married a 3rd time? What's this Katlana's business? Mayan Goyrim, there's something about her that when she has intimate relations, it kills off her husbands. And Rabashi says, which is the halacha, mazel Goyrim. It's not the mayan, it's just a mazel. For some reason or another, she has this thing around her that her husbands will die. And she has no control over that. It's just her mazel. And that's why we label her a katlanis. Says the Gemara, my benai, what's the difference which opinion it is? Ika benai, the ears of a mate. What happened? There was no marriage or no intimate relationship. She was just engaged. The 3rd husband and he died. Or inamid enough medical mate. He fell off a palm tree and he died. What happens then? So if you learn it's mazel goyim, the fact is it's a katlanis. And in the Rishonim, they go a bit further. They say that has to be like in a similar, even if we learn mazel goyim and the people die, but it has to be either similar events or it has to be like in a similar place. And I saw a shayla to the Chelkas Yaakov once, where one husband died in a plane crash over Paris, and the husband died in a car crash in the streets of Paris. Is that considered like, both crashes in the same place or different places? Amalei Rabbi Yosef ben Rabbi asked halacha kerebi. I asked Rabbi Yosef, is the halacha like Rebbe? Amalei, yes. There were 2 times established a chazak. And then I asked him another occasion, is the halacha like Gamliel? And Amalei, he told me again, yes, it is. So the guy's mocking me. One day he says to Rebbe 2 times, one day he says 3 times. Amalei, so Rabbi said to his son, no, he's not at all. You misunderstood what he's trying to say here. What he was telling you was sometimes the halach is like Rebbe and sometimes the halach is like Rishon Galil. The Suyin Malkus Rebbe, when it comes to getting married, the Suyin, and the big machlek is showing which part of the Suyin. Are we talking about the Suyin if she married twice and didn't have any kids, she should not marry another time? The halach is like Rebbe, or the Suyin means Kaplanis. If she lived with 2 men and they died, should not marry a 3rd time. Big machlekes are showing there. So in the Suyin of Malkis is like Rebbe. When it comes to Malkis, we'll soon see what Malkis is. It's like Rebbe. Now, what 2 times is enough to establish? But best is when it comes to a woman, or Vesasas, when it comes to a woman to work out her period, when she menstruates, is it 2 times that establishes a day in a month, or is it 3 times, or the time between afloga between the 2? Is it 2 times or 3 times? There we follow like a shimbal 3 times, and also to break a chazaka, you need 3 times missing that date. Also to establish an animal to be a wild animal, it has to happen 3 times. The Suyin Hadam we just said. So your machlek is which thing we just said. Malkis is now Misha Loka Vishano. This very interesting thing here, right? We don't normally have a prison system at all. Only if we, something happened, we're holding in a pen to determine whether the guy's going to die or not going to die. But here we have an interesting capital punishment without capital punishment. Misha Laka Vishana, he committed a sin that you get Malkus, which is, let's say, normally a Chayiv Karas, and he repeated it. Terrible Averia, and he did it again. In other words, he didn't care. Nothing deterred him. Then you know what Bezdin does? And here it's just twice. Bezdin Koinsin Oisel Keeper. They incarcerate him the 3rd time. If he commits the sin the 3rd time, they put him in jail. And first they feed him barley, so his stomach starts to shrink. And then they feed him normal food, and his stomach implodes. So he dies. He dies because he's mocking the whole system. According to Rashi, he has to do with Avera a 3rd time. Other Mefarshim ask, if twice establishes it, then as soon as he did it a second time, put him then in the jail. Anyway, Vesed now we learned any Shikavas Vesed actually Tikvena Sholosh Ba'amim. A woman does not fix her date on the calendar when she menstruates until the same day. Let's say Chav Siv and Chav Tammuz Chav the same day, or the difference between the days what she doesn't see is the exact same fixed time. They mataheres when Vesed Tikvena Sholosh Ba'amim. If she already has a chazaka in a certain day of the month that she always sees, in order to abolish that, to undo that, it has to be 3 times that day comes by and you didn't see. And Sharamuad, the last one is Sharamuad. Now we learned Ein Hashay Nasamuad Achid by Shos Pamim. Hashay does not become a muad until he killed 3 times and was worn 3 times. If he does it a 4th time, then he pays the full nezik, the full value, not just half a nezik. Okay, we'll stop here and continue tomorrow in Mitzvah Shem.
Thank you.
Thank you.